I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a coffee mug that had gone cold in my hands, when I heard my daughter's voice drifting from the living room. The tone was light, almost carefree, like she was discussing weekend plans or a shopping trip. But something in the way she laughed made me pause, made me stop breathing for just a second. I moved closer to the doorway, careful not to make a sound, and that's when I heard the words that would change everything. Just drop all 6 kids off at Mum's place on Christmas Eve. She's got nothing else going on anyway. James and I already booked that cabin in the mountains. It'll be perfect, just the 2 of us. No kids, no stress, no interruptions. My name is Miriam Hayes. I'm 68 years old. I've been a widow for 13 years, and in that moment, standing in the shadows of my own hallway, I realized I had become invisible to my own children. Not invisible in the way that happened slowly over time, but invisible in a way that felt deliberate, like I only existed when they needed something. My daughter Rebecca continued talking, her voice bright with excitement. Yeah, Daniel and Karen are doing the same thing. They're heading to that resort in the Poconos. Mom's used to handling all the kids. Remember last year? She managed just fine. Plus, she already bought all the presents and paid for the Christmas dinner. We just have to show up, eat, and leave. Honestly, it's the perfect setup. Perfect. That word hung in the air like smoke. Perfect for everyone except me. I carefully set the mug down on the hallway table, my hands trembling now, not from weakness, but from something else entirely. Something that had been building inside me for years, waiting for this exact moment to finally break free. Rage. Pure clarifying rage. I walked back through the kitchen and up the stairs to my bedroom. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if I were carrying the weight of every single time I had said yes when I wanted to say no. Every single time I had smiled through my exhaustion. Every single time I had put everyone else's needs before my own. I closed my bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall covered in family photographs. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, holidays. In every single photo, I was there. Always in the background, always serving, always holding someone, always smiling. But never at the center. Never the focus, never the reason for the celebration. I stood up and walked to my closet. There, lined up on the shelf, were shopping bags filled with carefully wrapped gifts. 6 presents for my 6 grandchildren. I had spent the last 4 months searching for the perfect items. A science kit for Oliver, an art set for Sophia, books for twins Emma and Ethan, a musical keyboard for little Grace, a building set for Noah. Total cost, nearly $1,400. Money that came from my pension, which wasn't generous, but I had managed it carefully, cutting back on things I needed so I could give them something special. Next to the gifts was a receipt from the grocery store. I had prepaid for the entire Christmas dinner. Turkey, ham, all the sides, 3 different desserts, drinks for 18 people. Another $850. I had done it without anyone asking. I had done it because I thought that's what love looked like. I thought if I gave enough, eventually I would receive something in return. Not money or gifts, but acknowledgement, appreciation. The simple recognition that I mattered. How incredibly naive I had been. I sat back down on the bed and closed my eyes. Memories flooded in like a dam breaking. Last Christmas, I had cooked for 3 straight days. Rebecca and James arrived 2 hours late, ate quickly, and left before dessert because they had a party with friends. Daniel and Karen did exactly the same. The children stayed with me until almost midnight. I bathed them, set up air mattresses in the living room, told them stories until they fell asleep. Meanwhile, their parents were out celebrating somewhere else, toasting champagne and laughing, while I cleaned up wrapping paper and wiped spilled juice off my furniture. The Christmas before that, the same pattern. I prepared everything. They consumed it. At the end of the night, I was alone with a sink full of dirty dishes and the echo of silence filling every room of my house. There, after year, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, I was always the one in the kitchen, always the one cleaning, always the one watching the children while everyone else enjoyed themselves. But my birthday? Last year, Rebecca called me 4 days later to say she had forgotten. Daniel never called at all. No cake, no dinner, no card, just a text message from Rebecca that said, "Sorry, Mum, it completely slipped my mind. You know how crazy things get with the kids." Phew. I opened my eyes and looked at those shopping bags again. Something fundamental shifted inside me at that moment. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It wasn't screaming or hysterical crying. It was something much deeper and much quieter. It was the sound of a woman finally understanding that she had been living for everyone except herself. That she had become a utility instead of a person. A resource instead of a mother. I stood up and walked to my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Beth Morrison, my best friend of 32 years. Beth had invited me the previous week to spend Christmas at her daughter's beach house. I had declined because, of course, I had to be with my family. I had obligations. I had responsibilities. I had a role to play. I dialed her number. It rang 3 times. "Miriam, what a lovely surprise. How are you, dear?" "Beth," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "Is that invitation for Christmas still available?" There was a brief pause on the other end. Then Beth's warm, familiar voice replied, "Of course it is, sweetheart. What's happened?" "Nothing has happened," I said. Or maybe something had finally happened. Something important. "I've just decided that this year I want to do things differently." "That sounds absolutely wonderful," Beth said. "We're leaving on the 22nd in the morning. The beach house is beautiful this time of year. Quiet, peaceful, just the ocean and good company. No pressure, no chaos, just rest." "That sounds like exactly what I need," I said. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, and when I hung up, I stood there looking at my phone. Something had changed. I didn't know exactly what, but I could feel it. It was as if, after years of carrying an invisible burden, someone had finally given me permission to set it down. I went back downstairs. Rebecca had left without saying goodbye, which was typical. I took out my notebook and started writing a list. Not a grocery list, not a to-do list for Christmas preparations. This was a list of things I was going to cancel. I sat at the kitchen table with that notebook open in front of me. Outside, the December afternoon light was fading into gray. Inside me, something dark and powerful was beginning to move. I wrote the first line in careful letters. Cancel grocery store order. $850 that would be refunded to my account. $850 that I had carefully set aside, denying myself new shoes and a winter coat I desperately needed. I wrote the second line. Return all Christmas gifts. $1,400 more. Money I had saved for months. Eating simple meals and turning down invitations because I couldn't afford them after buying presents for grandchildren whose parents had plenty of money to buy gifts themselves. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair. More memories arrived, uninvited but insistent. I remembered Christmas 6 years ago. It was my first Christmas without my husband. He had died in September, and I was still shattered inside, barely holding myself together. Rebecca had called me 3 weeks before Christmas and said, "Mom, you're still cooking this year, right? The kids are counting on your turkey and stuffing. We shan't disappoint them." I had just lost the love of my life, my partner of 43 years, and my daughter was asking about turkey. She didn't ask how I was coping. She didn't offer to host Christmas herself. She didn't suggest we do something simpler that year. She just reminded me of my obligation, and I had done it. I had cooked the turkey. I had made the stuffing, the mashed potatoes, the green beans, the rolls, the pies. I had decorated the house. I had wrapped presents. I had put on a nice dress and smiled when everyone arrived. No one mentioned my husband. No one raised a glass to his memory. It was as if he had never existed. They ate. They opened gifts. They left early. I spent that night sitting alone on the sofa, looking at leftover food, and wondering if anyone would notice if I simply disappeared. I also remembered my 65th birthday. It had been 3 years ago. I hadn't expected much, because I had learned not to expect anything. But that particular day, I had woken up with a small flutter of hope in my chest. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe Rebecca would remember. Maybe Daniel would stop by with the kids. Maybe someone would make me feel like my existence mattered to them. I waited all day. I made coffee in case someone came. I even baked a small cake for myself, feeling foolish and pathetic for doing it. The hours crawled by. The phone stayed silent. No one knocked on the door. At 9 o'clock that night, I finally got a text message from Rebecca. "OMG, Mom, I'm so sorry. Happy belated birthday. This week has been absolutely insane." Daniel never messaged at all. I ate a slice of cake alone in my dark kitchen, wondering when I had become so utterly invisible to the people I had given my whole life to. But the forgotten birthdays weren't even the worst part. The worst part was all the times I became suddenly visible again the moment they needed something. I remembered when Rebecca had her first baby. I had been so excited to become a grandmother. I thought it would be a beautiful new chapter we would share together, full of tender moments and shared joy. But from the very first day, Rebecca turned me into her personal childcare service. "Mom, can you come watch Oliver? I need to sleep." "Mom, can you take him for the weekend? James and I really need some time alone." "Mom, can you pick him up from daycare?" "I have a meeting." It was never, "Mum, thank you so much." It was never, "Mum, how are you holding up?" It was always, "Mum, I need you to do this." And I did it. Of course I did it. Because I thought that's what good mothers did. I thought if I made myself indispensable, if I solved all their problems, eventually they would see me. They would value me. They would love me the way I desperately needed to be loved. But it didn't work that way. The more I gave, the more they expected. The more I did, the more they took. I became a solution instead of a person, a convenience instead of a mother. Daniel wasn't any different. When he and Karen had their first child, the pattern repeated exactly. Late-night phone calls because the baby wouldn't stop crying and they didn't know what to do. Entire weekends babysitting because they needed couple time. They never paid me. They never truly thanked me. They just assumed I would always be available, always willing, a woman with no life of her own and no needs that mattered. And the saddest part is that I allowed it to happen. I trained my own children to treat me this way. Every time I said yes when everything inside me was screaming no. Every time I smiled when I was breaking. Every time I swallowed my pain to avoid making them uncomfortable. I built this prison myself. I forged every single link in these chains with my own hands. I got up from the table and walked to the window. Outside, my neighbors' Christmas lights were starting to glow in the dusk. Bright, cheerful colors trying to push back against the winter darkness. But inside me, there was only gray. I thought about all the previous Christmases, all the trees I had decorated alone, all the dinners I had prepared while my children arrived late or didn't come at all the gifts I had wrapped with care while they texted me their wish lists, like I was some kind of shopping service. I thought about last spring when Rebecca asked me to watch her 3 children for 5 days because she and James were going on an anniversary cruise. I said yes, naturally. During those 5 days, all 3 kids got stomach flu, high fevers, vomiting, the works. I didn't sleep for 4 nights straight. I took them to urgent care. I gave them medicine. I cleaned up after them. I held them when they cried, tanned and relaxed and glowing. The first words out of her mouth were, "Mom, the house is a mess." What happened? And why did the kids look so tired? She didn't ask how I was. She didn't thank me for sacrificing my sleep and my health. She criticized me, and I had apologized. I had actually apologized to her, as if I had done something wrong by keeping her children alive and safe. I also remembered when Daniel borrowed money from me 3 years ago. He needed $5,000 to cover some business expense. He promised he would pay me back within 6 months. It was nearly all of my emergency savings, money I had carefully accumulated over years in case something happened to the house or I needed medical care. I gave him the money because he was my son and he needed help. 6 months passed, a year passed, 18 months passed. He never paid me back. When I finally gathered the courage to ask about it, he looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "Mom, I'm going through a rough patch right now. I thought you just gave me that money. You're my mother. Isn't that what mothers do? Help their kids without keeping score?" I had been speechless. Because he was right about one thing. I had always given without keeping score. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. It didn't mean I didn't feel used and discarded. I turned away from the window and went back to the table. I opened the notebook again and started writing a different kind of list. This one wasn't about cancellations. This was a list of all the times I had been invisible. All the times I had been taken for granted. All the times my needs had been dismissed as inconvenient or unimportant. My 63rd birthday. No one came. No one called. Mother's Day 2 years ago. I got a generic greeting card in the mail from Rebecca. Nothing from Daniel. Christmas 4 years ago. I cooked for 20 people. Everyone left immediately after dinner. No one stayed to help clean up. The time I was hospitalized with pneumonia. Rebecca said she couldn't visit because she had a yoga class. Daniel said he was too busy with work. I spent 4 days in the hospital alone. When I sold my mother's jewelry to help Daniel with his failed business venture. He never thanked me, never acknowledged what those pieces meant to me. The list grew and grew, filling page after page. Years and years of moments when I had been treated as secondary. As someone whose existence only mattered when it was useful to someone else. When I finally finished writing, I looked at those pages filled with my own handwriting and realized something profound. I had stopped existing as Miriam Hayes a long time ago. I'd become Mom, the problem solver. Grandma, the babysitter. Her, the one who's always available. I was no longer a woman with dreams, desires, and needs. I was a function, a role, a convenience. I closed the notebook hard. The sound echoed through the empty kitchen. Something inside me hardened at that moment. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was something much simpler and infinitely more powerful. It was the decision to stop disappearing. It was the choice to become visible again, not to them, but to myself. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the profound silence of my house. It was a silence I knew intimately, the same silence that had been my constant companion for the 13 years since my husband died and left me alone in this world. But I wasn't really alone, was I? I had 2 children. I had 6 grandchildren. I had a family. Or at least, that's what I always believed. That's what I had told myself every lonely night for over a decade. I got out of bed around 2 in the morning and went downstairs. I turned on a lamp in the living room and sat on the sofa. On the wall across from me hung a large family portrait we had taken 5 years ago. We were all there. Rebecca with James and their 3 children, Daniel with Karen and their 3 children, and me, right in the center, smiling. But as I stared at that photograph now, something struck me with brutal clarity. I wasn't really in the center at all. I was in the back row, barely visible behind everyone else. Like the photographer had decided my presence wasn't important enough to feature prominently. I walked closer and examined the image more carefully. Rebecca was front and center, perfectly styled, radiant smile. Daniel beside her, with that confident expression he always wore. The grandchildren arranged around them like little angels. James and Karen posing like catalog models. And me, small, slightly out of focus, almost hidden, barely there. I remembered the day we took that photo. It had been Rebecca's idea. Mom, we need a professional family portrait. Something really nice we can frame and display. I had been thrilled. I thought finally there would be a lasting memory of all of us together, united as a family. But when we got to the photography studio, the photographer started arranging everyone. He positioned Rebecca and Daniel in front. He placed the grandchildren strategically around them. He put James and Karen in complementary positions. Then he looked at me and said, "Grandma, you stand in the back there. That way you won't block anyone important." I had obeyed. Of course I had obeyed. I stood in the back. I didn't block anyone. I let everyone else shine, while I remained in the shadows where I apparently belonged. When Rebecca saw the proofs, she was delighted. "You look great, Mom. Perfect, right there in the back. Perfect in the back." Those words burned now like acid on my skin. I moved away from the portrait and went to a bookshelf where I kept more photographs, albums and framed pictures from over the years. Birthdays, holidays, celebrations. I started going through them one by one, and a pattern emerged that I had never noticed before, or maybe had chosen not to see. In Rebecca's college graduation photo, I wasn't there. She had told me there were limited tickets, only enough for her husband and children. "You understand, right, Mom? There's just not enough space." I had understood. I always understood. In the photo from Daniel's youngest child's baptism, I was literally cut in half. Someone had cropped the picture, and my face was divided by the edge of the frame. The important part was the baby and the parents. I was expendable. In the Christmas photo from 4 years ago, I wasn't at the table with everyone else. I was in the kitchen in the background, carrying a serving platter. Not celebrating, not toasting, working. Photo after photo after photo. I was absent, or cropped out, or blurred, or relegated to the background, doing something useful. I was never the focus, never the subject, always the accessory, the help, the background extra in someone else's story. I sat back down with an old album in my lap. This one was from when my children were young. Photos of Rebecca at age 4, Daniel at age 6, birthday parties, beach vacations, playground afternoons. In all of these pictures, I was fully present, smiling, hugging them, kissing their cheeks, being their mother in every visible way. When had I stopped being their mother and become their servant? When had that transformation happened? I tried to pinpoint the exact moment, but it was impossible. It hadn't been a single event. It had been a gradual erosion, so slow and subtle that I hadn't noticed until there was almost nothing left of me. I remembered a specific moment, though. Rebecca was 17. She had come home from school devastated because a friend had betrayed her. I was cooking dinner, but I immediately stopped everything. I sat with her for over 2 hours, listening to her cry, offering advice, making her laugh again. At the end, she had hugged me tightly and said, "Thanks, Mum. You're the best. You're always there when I need you. You're always there when I need you." That phrase had felt like a blessing at the time. Now I saw it for what it really was, a definition of my worth based entirely on my availability to solve her problems. Not someone who existed for herself, not someone with her own needs and struggles, Just someone who was there, always there, endlessly available. With Daniel, it had been the same pattern. I remembered when he was 22 and went through a terrible breakup. He came to my house in the middle of the night, sobbing. I stayed up with him until dawn. I made him tea and held him while he cried. I told him everything would be okay, that he would heal, that he would love again. I was at him so much, I was so drained. He didn't know what was wrong with me. You always know how to fix things. Another curse disguised as a compliment, because that's what I did. I fixed their problems. I solved their crises. I was the emergency contact, the backup plan, the safety net. And somewhere along that road, I had stopped being a complete person and become a tool they pulled out when needed and put away when they were done. I closed the album and set it aside. My hands were shaking again, not from cold, but from contained fury. A fury that had been building for decades, layer upon layer, until it had become this heavy, solid thing sitting in the center of my chest. I thought about Mother's Day last year, that day that's supposed to honor mothers, to make them feel special and appreciated. Rebecca had sent me a text message at 10:30 in the morning. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Love you," with a heart emoji. That was it. A text message she probably sent while still in bed, barely awake, putting in the absolute minimum effort. Daniel had called me at 4 in the afternoon. "Hey, Mom, happy Mother's Day. Listen, can you watch the kids next Saturday? Karen and I need to go to a wedding." Even on Mother's Day, I couldn't just be the mother. I had to continue being the babysitter, the convenience, the solution to his scheduling problems. I had said yes, naturally. And I had spent that day entirely alone, cooking a meal for myself and pretending I didn't care. But I had cared. God, how I had cared. I had sat at my table, eating alone, crying quietly into my food, wondering why loving my children so much meant receiving so little in return. I stood up and walked to the window again. Outside, the street was completely empty now. The neighbors' Christmas lights were still blinking in the darkness. Red, green, gold. Colors that promised joy and warmth and belonging. Colors that were lies. I thought about all the times I had strung those same lights on my own house. All the times I had decorated the tree by myself, standing on a stepladder at 65, 66, 67 years old, risking a fall because no one offered to help. All the times I had tried to create warmth and magic for my family. And what had I received in return? Nothing. Less than nothing. I had received their absence, their indifference, their assumption that I would always be there no matter how they treated me. I remembered when I got sick 3 years ago. A severe case of bronchitis that left me bedridden for nearly 3 weeks. The doctor told me I needed complete rest and that someone should check on me daily. I had called Rebecca first. "Mom, I really can't. Oliver has soccer practice, and Sophia has dance class, and I'm completely swamped. But I'll send you some soup, okay?" She never sent the soup. I called Daniel next. "Mom, this week is brutal for me. Karen's hosting this big event, and I have back-to-back meetings, but I'll try to stop by." Maybe. He never stopped by. I spent those 3 weeks alone, dragging myself to the kitchen to heat up canned soup, taking medicine with trembling hands, sleeping through fever dreams with no one to check if I was breathing. And when I finally recovered and became available to them again, neither of them asked how I had been. They just started calling again with new requests. "Mom, can you watch the kids? Mom, can you lend me some money? Mom, I need help with this thing." Always needing, never giving, taking and taking and taking, until there was almost nothing left of me to take. I walked away from the window and returned to the sofa. I took out my phone and opened my photo gallery. I started scrolling through recent pictures, and what I found made everything even clearer. These were photos that Rebecca and Daniel posted on social media. Photos of their lives, their adventures, their happiness. There they were at expensive restaurants, smiling over wine glasses. There they were on beach vacations, tanned and carefree. There they were at concerts, parties, weekend getaways, living their full, rich, perfect lives. And in not a single one of these photos was I present, because I wasn't part of their real lives. I was part of their obligations, part of their burdens, something they had to manage and deal with, but not celebrate or include. I kept scrolling and found a photo from 8 months ago. It was James's 40th birthday party. Rebecca had thrown this huge celebration. There was catered food, a DJ, decorations, at least 50 people. Everyone looked happy and festive. I had not been invited. I found out about the party 3 days later when I saw the photos online. When I asked Rebecca why she hadn't invited me, she had said, "Oh, Mom, it was really more of an adult party. Lots of drinking and loud music. I didn't think you'd enjoy it. Plus, it was kind of last minute." Last minute. The photos showed weeks of planning, professional catering, custom decorations, a photographer. But I wasn't invited because I didn't fit into their social circle. I was just the woman who babysat their children when they wanted to go to parties like that. The tears started falling then. Not sad tears, angry tears, frustrated tears. Years and years of feeling small and invisible and insignificant, all pouring out at once. I wiped them away roughly. I wasn't going to cry anymore about this. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for my children to finally see me, because I understood now, with perfect clarity, that they were never going to see me. Not because I was invisible, but because they had actively chosen not to look. So, dawn came slowly. That morning, I was still awake on the sofa, surrounded by scattered photographs and albums. Grey morning light began filtering through the windows, illuminating the evidence of my own erasure. I got up with an aching body. I hadn't slept at all, but my mind felt clearer and sharper than it had in years, as if the fog of confusion and self-doubt had finally lifted, and I could see reality with painful, crystalline clarity. It was that morning. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. While the machine burbled and hissed, I looked up the grocery store's phone number. It was 6:30 in the morning. They opened at 7. I decided to wait, using the time to drink my coffee and steel my resolve. At exactly 7 o'clock, I dialed the number. A cheerful voice answered. "Good morning, Fletcher's Market, how can I help you?" "Good morning," I said calmly. "I need to cancel a large Christmas order. The name is Miriam Hayes." There was a pause as the person searched in their system. "Yes, I have it here. Quite a large order for 18 people. Turkey, ham, all the trimmings, several desserts. The total is $850. Are you certain you want to cancel? We're just about to start preparing everything for pickup on the 23rd. "I'm absolutely certain," I said. "Please cancel the entire order." "Understood, Mrs. Hayes. The full refund will be processed back to your card within 3 to 5 business days. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "No, that's everything. Thank you." I hung up and stared at the phone in my hand. $850 coming back to me. $850 I could use for something I wanted. Something that would bring me joy instead of resentment. Next on my list were the gifts. I had purchased 6 presents from various stores over the past 4 months. Some had receipts, others didn't. But I was going to attempt to return every single one. I got dressed quickly and left the house. The first store opened at 8. I arrived 20 minutes early and waited in my car in the parking lot, watching other shoppers arrive for their own holiday preparations. When the doors finally opened, I walked directly to the customer service counter. "Good morning, I need to return this." I placed a large box on the counter. It contained an elaborate building set I had purchased for Daniel's oldest son. $175. The employee scanned the receipt. This is still within our return window. Any problem with the product? No problem, I said. I simply changed my mind. No problem, Mrs. Hayes. Refunds to the original card? Yes, please. She processed the return and handed me the receipt. $175 back. End. I went to the second store. I returned an expensive bicycle I had bought for one of Rebecca's daughters. $230 recovered. Third store, a complete art supply set. $120. Fourth store, clothing for two of the grandchildren. $180. Store after store, return after return. Sun employees looked at me with curiosity. An older woman returning so many children's gifts right before Christmas. They probably thought it was odd, maybe even sad. I didn't care what they thought. This wasn't their life. These weren't their ungrateful children. By early afternoon, I had recovered $1,300. There were two gifts I couldn't return because I had misplaced the receipts. I donated them to a charity collection box outside a church. Let them go to children whose parents might actually appreciate their grandmothers. Children who might grow up understanding that family means more than convenient free childcare. I drove home feeling physically exhausted, but emotionally lighter. Like I had been carrying a crushing weight for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. I sat in my living room and called Beth again. Miriam, how are you feeling? Beth, I said. About that beach trip. How long were you planning to stay? Well, I was thinking through the 27th, but my daughter said we're welcome to stay longer if we want. She's actually thinking of being there through New Year's. It's such a peaceful place, perfect for really resting and recharging. Why? Can I come with you? Not just for Christmas. I want to stay longer. A week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe even through New Year's. There was a pause. Then Beth's voice came through, soft and concerned. Miriam, are you all right? Talk to me, sweetheart. And then everything poured out. I told her about the conversation I had overheard, about Rebecca and Daniel planning to dump all 6 children on me while they went on vacation, about all the years of being invisible, being used, being taken for granted, about the forgotten birthdays and the lonely holidays, about feeling like a vending machine that dispensed childcare and money and emotional labor, but received nothing in return. Beth listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, her voice was firm and warm. Miriam, listen to me very carefully. You're coming with me. We're leaving on the 22nd in the morning, and we're not coming back until you're ready. We're going to spend Christmas and New Year's at the beach. We're going to eat good food, take long walks, read books, and rest without any pressure from anyone. And if your children call, you don't answer. Do you hear me? You do not answer. But the grandchildren, I started to say. The grandchildren have parents, Beth interrupted firmly. And those parents can take care of their own children for once in their lives. You are not responsible for solving problems they created for themselves. They're adults, Miriam. They need to act like it. She was right. Of course she was right. But decades of conditioning don't disappear with one conversation. I'm scared, Beth. Scared of what they'll say. Scared of what they'll think of me. And what about what you think? Beth asked. What about how you feel? Miriam, you've spent your entire life worrying about everyone else's feelings. It's time someone worried about yours. And if no one else is going to do it, then you have to do it for yourself. We talked for another hour, making plans. F would pick me up at 7 in the morning on the 22nd. We would take only what we needed. Comfortable clothes, books, no stress, no obligations, no guilt. So the next few days passed in a strange suspended state. Rebecca called twice to confirm everything was set for Christmas. I gave evasive answers. Yes, Rebecca, everything's under control. I wasn't lying. Everything was under control. My control, not hers. Daniel sent a text message. Mom, We're dropping the kids off at your place on Christmas Eve at 9 a.m. We'll pick them up on the 26th around dinner time. Thanks for doing this. You're the best. I didn't respond. I just left the message on read. Let him wonder. Let him assume. Let him be confused for once in his life. On the evening of December 21st, I started packing. I pulled a medium-sized suitcase from my closet and laid it on the bed. I didn't need much. A few pairs of comfortable pants, light shirts, a sweater for cool evenings, sandals, my bathing suit that I hadn't worn in 5 years. As I was folding clothes, the doorbell rang. It was almost 8 o'clock at night. I went downstairs, puzzled, and opened the door. It was Rebecca. She had a shopping bag in her hand and a tense smile on her face. "Hi, Mom. I brought you these." She held out the bag. Inside were packages of crackers and juice boxes. For the kids, you know. They like to snack constantly. I figured I'd save you a trip to the store. She didn't come inside. She didn't ask how I was. She just stood there on my doorstep, like a delivery person dropping off a package. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She glanced at her watch. "Mom, I really can't stay. James is waiting in the car and we have dinner reservations. Can it be quick?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the woman she had become, successful, confident, impeccably dressed. But I also saw what she had become to me. Someone who had learned to use people without ever realizing she was doing it. Someone who took and never noticed when the well ran dry. "I'm not going to be here for Christmas," I said. Rebecca blinked, confused. "What do you mean you're not going to be here?" "Ma, we already have plans. Everything's arranged." "You arranged everything," I said. "I didn't agree to anything. I heard your conversation last week. I know you and Daniel planned to leave all 6 children with me while you went on vacation." Her face went rigid. "You were listening to my private phone conversation?" "I was in my own house. You were the one talking without caring who heard." "Mom, it's not a big deal. It's just a few days. The kids love staying with you." "It's not a big deal," I repeated slowly. "It's not a big deal that you use me as free childcare. It's not a big deal that you assume I have no life of my own. It's not a big deal that you never ask me what I want or how I feel. What are you talking about? We always include you in everything." "Include me?" My voice rose slightly. "Rebecca, I wasn't invited to James's birthday party. I wasn't invited to your anniversary celebration last year." "The only time you include me is when you need something from me. You're being ridiculous and dramatic." "No," I said firmly. "I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years." Rebecca sighed with exasperation. "Fine. So what do you want? Do you want us to pay you? Is that what this is about?" Her words hit me like a physical blow. Pay me, as if money was the missing piece. As if the problem was financial compensation rather than basic respect and love. "I don't want your money, Rebecca. I want you to see me. I want you to value me as a person, not a convenience. But I realize now that's never going to happen. So I've decided to do something different this year." "What?" "I'm going on a trip. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, and I won't be back until after New Year's." The silence that followed was so thick I could almost touch it. Rebecca stared at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she found words. "You're going on a trip? Mum, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "But everything's planned. The kids are expecting to spend Christmas with Grandma. We already paid for our cabin. We already told everyone." "Then you'll have to change your plans, just like I'm changing mine." Rebecca took a step backward, as if my words were physically pushing her. "You can't do this to us. It's Christmas. It's family time." "Family time," I repeated. "But I don't count as family, do I? I only count when you need something from me." "You're being absolutely ridiculous. Of course you're family. When was the last time you invited me to do something that didn't involve watching your children?" I asked. When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you remembered my birthday without me having to remind you? She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I watched her search her memory, trying to find even one example. She couldn't. Exactly, I said. You can't remember because it hasn't happened. I only exist for you when you need me. Mom, you're misinterpreting everything. We've been busy, that's all. But that doesn't mean we don't love you. Love without action is just empty words, Rebecca. Her face began to flush red. I recognized that expression. It was the same look she used to get as a child when she didn't get her way. And what are we supposed to do with the kids? We already paid thousands of dollars for this trip. We can't just cancel everything at the last minute. That's not my problem to solve. Not your problem? Her voice went shrill. They're your grandchildren. Yes, they're my grandchildren. But they are your children. Your responsibility, not mine. Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. I don't recognize you. This isn't you. This isn't the mother I know. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. This isn't the woman you've known your whole life. That woman let herself be walked all over. That woman sacrificed everything and got nothing in return. This is the new version, the one who has decided that enough is enough. And you're just going to do this? You're going to ruin your grandchildren's Christmas just to make some petty point? Her words were designed to trigger my guilt. And for a moment, they worked. I felt that familiar pang in my chest, that urge to back down, to apologize, to return to my assigned role. But then I remembered that overheard conversation. Just drop all 6 kids off at Mom's place. She's got nothing else going on anyway. I'm not ruining anything, I said steadily. You ruined the respect you should have had for me years ago. I'm just finally picking up what's left of my dignity. This is pure selfishness. Dad would be so disappointed in you. That was the final straw. Mentioning my dead husband. Using him as a weapon against me. Don't you dare, I said, and my voice came out harder than I intended. Don't you dare talk about your father. He never treated me the way you do. He valued me. He saw me. He truly loved me. He would understand exactly why I'm doing this. We love you too. No, I said quietly. You use me. There's a significant difference. Rebecca pulled out her phone. I'm calling Daniel. He needs to hear this insanity. Call him if you want. My decision isn't going to change. She dialed while glaring at me. She waited for him to answer, then said sharply, Daniel, you're on speaker. I'm at Mom's house, and she just told me she's not going to be here for Christmas. She's going on some trip. Tell her this is absolutely crazy. I heard Daniel's voice through the phone speaker. What? Mom, is that true? Yes, Daniel, it's true. But why? What happened? Did we do something wrong? Many things have been wrong for many years, I said. I finally decided I deserve better than being treated like your personal assistant. Nobody treats you like an assistant. You're our mother. When was my last birthday, Daniel? Silence. I'll tell you. It was August 16th. That's over 4 months ago. You didn't call. You didn't text. You didn't acknowledge it at all. Nothing. Mum, I was dealing with. You're always dealing with something. I interrupted. Everyone is always too busy, except when you need me for something. And suddenly you find the time. This isn't fair, Rebecca interjected. You're punishing us for things we didn't even know bothered you. They bothered me because you never stopped to ask how I felt. You never cared about my experience. You only cared about what I could provide for you. Daniel spoke again, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. Mom, we can talk about all of this after the holidays, but right now, we need you to be available. I finished for him. That's the word you're looking for. You need me to be available. Well, I'm not anymore. Then what are we supposed to do? Daniel's voice rose. We've already paid for everything. Our reservations are non-refundable. You're going to do what all parents do. You're going to take care of your own children. Cancel your trips. Or take the kids with you. Or hire a babysitter. I don't know, and I don't care. It's not my problem to solve. Rebecca's eyes widened. Mom, be reasonable. We've already spent thousands of dollars on these trips. We can't just... I paid $850 for a Christmas dinner you were going to eat. $1,400 for gifts you were going to open and barely acknowledge. That money mattered to me too. Or at least it should have. Wait, Daniel said through the phone. You cancelled the dinner. And returned the gifts? Every single one. And I got my money back. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could imagine Daniel's face, processing this information, realizing I was serious. I can't believe you actually did that, Rebecca finally whispered. The kids are going to be devastated. The kids are going to be fine. They're resilient. What won't be fine is if they continue growing up, thinking that grandmothers exist only to serve them. Better they learn now that people have limits, even people who love them. Rebecca put her phone away. Her eyes were shining. Whether from tears or rage, I couldn't tell. Fine. Go on your trip. Take your little vacation. But don't expect things to be the same when you get back. I don't want things to be the same. That's precisely the point. She turned and started walking toward her car. Then she stopped and looked back at me. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret, I said clearly, is not doing it sooner. I watched her get into the car where James was waiting. Even from a distance, I could see her agitated body language as she told him what had happened. The car pulled away quickly and disappeared down the street. I closed the door and leaned against it. My hands were trembling. My heart was pounding, but I didn't feel bad. I felt free, lighter, like I had just cut chains I didn't even know were holding me down. I went back upstairs and continued packing. I folded each piece of clothing carefully, thinking about the beach, about the sound of waves, about conversations without hidden agendas. I packed my bathing suit. The navy one I had bought 3 years ago but never worn because there was never time for me to do anything, just for pleasure. I put in my favorite novel, one I had started 5 times but never finished because I was always interrupted by someone needing something. I added a brand new journal. Maybe I would write in it. Maybe I would sketch. Maybe I would just use it to make lists of things that made me happy, things I had forgotten I enjoyed. My phone started buzzing. It was Daniel calling. I didn't answer. He called 4 more times. Then Rebecca called. Then James. Then Karen. They all wanted to convince me, to manipulate me, to guilt me back into my assigned place. The place where I was useful but invisible, valued but not respected, needed but not loved. I turned off my phone completely. The silence that followed was beautiful, profound. It was the sound of my own autonomy. I sat on my bed and looked at the half-packed suitcase. It was a small suitcase. I didn't need much. Just enough space to breathe. Just enough room to remember who I was before I became everyone's solution. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. December 22nd dawned with a sky so clear it almost hurt to look at. I woke early before sunrise with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. The kind of excitement you feel before something good is about to happen. I took a long shower, letting the hot water ease my tense muscles. I dressed in comfortable traveling clothes, simple cotton pants and a soft shirt. Nothing that needed to be ironed or coordinated, just clothes that felt good against my skin. I went downstairs and made coffee, savoring it slowly while looking around my house. Everything was clean and orderly and empty. There were no Christmas decorations this year. No tree with twinkling lights. No garlands on the mantel. No wreaths on the doors. Just a house. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt completely acceptable. At exactly 7 o'clock, I heard a car horn. Beth had arrived right on time. I grabbed my suitcase, took one last look around, and walked out the door. Beth was standing beside her car, smiling wide, wearing sunglasses pushed up on her head. "Ready for this adventure?" she asked. "More than ready," I said. I put my suitcase in her trunk. It was an older car, but well-maintained, perfect for a long road trip. Beth had prepared a cooler with water, sodas, and snacks for the journey. When I settled into the passenger seat and closed the door, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pure relief. As if I had just released a weight I had been carrying for so many decades that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. "Everything okay?" Beth asked as she started the engine. "Everything is perfect." We left the neighborhood behind. The streets became less congested. The buildings became smaller and farther apart. And finally, there was just open road stretching ahead of us. Beth put on soft music. Nothing Christmas-related, just calm instrumental melodies that filled the space without demanding attention. For the first hour, we didn't talk much. I looked out the window, watching the landscape pass by. Open fields, bare winter trees, small towns that appeared and vanished. I felt like I was waking up from a long, confusing dream. "Did they call?" Beth asked eventually. "Many times." I turned off my phone. "Good decision," Beth said approvingly. There was a pause. Then I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Beth, do you think I'm a bad person?" She glanced at me quickly, then back at the road. "Why on earth would you think that?" "Because I left my grandchildren without Christmas. Because I cancelled everything. Because I just walked away." Beth was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Miriam, let me ask you something. If a friend of yours told you this exact story, if she said her children used her constantly, never appreciated her, only contacted her when they needed something, what would you tell her?" I thought about it. I would tell her she deserves better. Exactly. So why don't you deserve the same? I didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe I did, but had never allowed myself to say it out loud. I had spent so many years believing my value came from what I could give, from what I could do for others, that I had forgotten I also had the right to receive. To be valued, to be seen. We continued driving. We stopped once to get gas and stretch our legs. Beth bought coffee and pastries from a small roadside cafe. We sat on a bench outside, eating in comfortable silence, watching other travelers come and go. "The town we're going to is very small," Beth said. "There's not much to do, but that's the beauty of it. It's quiet and peaceful. The people are friendly. There's a gorgeous beach that goes on for miles. And my daughter's house has a big deck where you can watch the sunset over the water." It sounds perfect. There's barely any cell service, Beth added. And the internet is terrible. So you'll basically be disconnected from everything. Even better. We arrived at the coastal town around 1 in the afternoon. It was exactly as Beth had described. Small, charming, with painted houses in soft colors and narrow streets lined with old trees. The smell of salt water reached us immediately, carried on a cool breeze. It smelled like freedom. Beth's daughter's house was modest but lovely. 2 bedrooms, a cozy kitchen, a living room with huge windows facing the ocean. Everything was simple, clean, and peaceful. The kind of place where you could actually hear yourself think. "This is your room," Beth said, opening a door. Inside was a small bedroom with a bed covered in white linens, a nightstand with a lamp, and a window with a direct view of the sea. I dropped my suitcase on the floor and walked to that window. The ocean stretched out endlessly before me, gray-blue and sparkling in the afternoon light. Waves rolled in steadily, breaking white on the sand. Seagulls circled and called. I just stood there, watching, and something inside me that had been clenched tight for years began to slowly unfold. "I'm going to make us some lunch," Beth called from the doorway. "Rest for a bit, if you want." I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. The air here tasted different, cleaner, lighter. I turned on my phone briefly, just to see if there was any genuine emergency. 67 missed calls, 34 text messages, all from Rebecca, Daniel, James, Karen, and numbers I didn't recognize. Probably friends they had recruited to help guilt me into submission. The messages followed a predictable pattern. Confusion first, then anger, then manipulation. Rebecca, Mom, the kids are crying. They don't understand why you're not here. Is this really what you wanted? Daniel, I called the grocery store. They confirmed you cancelled everything. This is a level of selfishness I never imagined from you. James, Celia, Rebecca's extremely upset. This isn't good for her stress levels.
You need to come back immediately. Karen, I honestly don't understand what we did to deserve this. We've always treated you with nothing but respect. I read each message without feeling what I expected to feel. No guilt, no urgency to respond, just a clear, cold distance between their words and my heart. I turned off the phone again and put it at the bottom of my suitcase, beneath my clothes, where I wouldn't be tempted to check it constantly. Beth called from the kitchen. Lunch is ready. I found a simple but appealing meal laid out on the small dining table. Fresh salad with local vegetables, grilled fish, rice, sliced fruit. Simple food that tasted like care and attention. We ate slowly, without rushing, talking about small, unimportant things. The weather, the colors of the sunset, plans for the next few days. It was the kind of conversation where nothing was demanded of me, where I could just be present without performing or managing or solving. In Sunday's case, that was Beth's vision. I thought we could take a long walk on the beach in the morning. There's a little market in town where local artists sell handmade things. And in the evening, if you want, we can have a quiet dinner here. Or we can go to the little restaurant in town, whatever you prefer. What do I want? I repeated the question back to her, surprised by it. Yes, this trip is for you, Miriam. What do you want? When was the last time someone had asked me that question and actually waited for my answer? I had to think about it. I want to walk on the beach, I said slowly. I want to see the market, and in the evening, I want a peaceful dinner here. No stress. No performance. Just quiet. Beth smiled warmly. Then that's exactly what we'll do. That afternoon, we walked along the beach together. The sun was lowering toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. I let the cold water wash over my bare feet. It was shocking at first, but then refreshing, cleansing. Beth walked beside me, occasionally stopping to pick up an interesting shell or piece of driftwood. There were other people on the beach. Families with young children building sand castles, couples walking hand in hand, groups of friends laughing together. Everyone seemed content, peaceful. No one looked like they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. You know what hurts the most? I said suddenly, surprising myself by speaking the thought out loud. What, sweetheart? That they never even noticed I was disappearing. They never noticed that I was fading away right in front of them. I was only visible when they needed something. The rest of the time, I might as well not have existed. Beth stopped walking and turned to face me. She put her hands on my shoulders. Miriam, listen to me. You're not invisible. They chose not to see you. There's a huge difference. Your worth doesn't depend on whether they recognize it. Your value is inherent. It exists whether they acknowledge it or not. Her words broke something open inside me. The tears came then, flowing freely, while the sound of the waves provided a soundtrack. Beth pulled me into a hug. She didn't try to stop my crying. She didn't tell me everything would be okay. She just held me while I released years of accumulated pain and disappointment. When I finally stepped back, I wiped my eyes and looked at the horizon. The sun was touching the water now, creating a brilliant path of light across the waves. It was breathtakingly beautiful. A reminder that beauty still existed in the world, even when everything else felt broken. Thank you, I said to Beth. For what? For seeing me, for being here, for not judging me. That's what real friends do. We walked back to the house as twilight settled over the beach. Beth made tea, and we sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, listening to the constant rhythm of the ocean. We didn't talk much. The companionship itself was enough. The knowledge that I wasn't alone, that someone valued my presence for its own sake, not for what I could provide. That night I slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time in months. No nightmares, no anxiety, no waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing. Just deep. Restorative sleep is sleep of someone who had finally put down a burden they should never have been carrying in the first place. Christmas Eve dawned bright and clear. I woke to the sound of waves and seagulls and the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came back. I was far away. I was safe. I was choosing myself for the first time in decades. I got up slowly, luxuriously. No alarm, no rush, just the natural rhythm of my own body telling me it was time to wake. Beth was already in the kitchen making breakfast. Toast with butter and jam, fresh fruit, orange juice. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years, honestly." We ate breakfast on the deck, watching the ocean. The water was calmer this morning, almost glassy, reflecting the pale blue sky. A few people were already out walking on the beach, enjoying the cool morning before the day grew warmer. "Ready for the market?" Beth asked. "Absolutely ready." We walked into town together. The streets were more lively than they had been the day before. Christmas music played softly from some of the shops, but it wasn't the loud, overwhelming commercial music of shopping malls. It was gentle, almost comforting. The market was set up in a small square near the town center. Local craftspeople had set up tables displaying their work. Hand-woven scarves, pottery, jewelry, small paintings, wooden carvings. Everything had a personal touch, as if each piece carried a bit of the artist's soul. I stopped at a table displaying woven bracelets. They were simple but beautiful, each one unique in its combination of colors. The woman selling them was probably close to my age. She had weathered hands that spoke of years of work and creation. "These are lovely," I told her. "Thank you so much. I make each one myself. No two are exactly alike." "How much for this one?" I pointed to a bracelet in shades of turquoise and silver. $18, she replied. I pulled out my wallet and paid for it. She wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, but I asked her to put it on my wrist instead. It felt good there, light and simple, and entirely mine. A small symbol of this new chapter. Beth bought a pair of handmade earrings. We continued walking through the market, stopping at different tables without any pressure or schedule. For the first time in years, I was able to just browse, just look, just exist, without anyone needing anything from me. At one table, I found handmade journals. They reminded me of the one I had brought with me. I thought about all the things I wanted to write down, all the realizations I was having, all the ways I was changing and growing. I bought another journal, this one with a deep blue fabric cover. $12. I would use it as a backup for when the first one filled up with words that needed to come out. Around noon, we returned to the house. It was warm now, and we decided to spend the afternoon at the beach. Beth brought umbrellas and towels and a small cooler with drinks. I put on my bathing suit for the first time in 5 years. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving the bedroom. My body had aged. There were wrinkles, stretch marks, the evidence of time and gravity. But this was also the body that had carried and birthed 2 children. The body that had worked tirelessly for decades. The body that had brought me to this moment of freedom. At another time in my life, I would have criticized myself. I would have focused on everything that was wrong or imperfect. But today, looking at my reflection, I felt only gratitude. This body had been strong enough to get me here, to this beach, to this moment of choosing myself. We spent the afternoon under the umbrella. Beth read a book.
I simply sat and watched the ocean, feeling the sun on my skin, listening to the eternal rhythm of the waves. There was such peace here, a peace I hadn't known was possible. Around mid-afternoon, I turned on my phone briefly. More messages, more missed calls. The tone had shifted now, from anger to attempted manipulation. Amanda, we had to cancel our trip. The resort wouldn't give us our money back. Daniel is furious with you. The kids won't stop crying and asking for you. I really hope you're satisfied with yourself. I read the message twice. I waited for the guilt to arrive, for the familiar urge to fix everything, to make it better. But all I felt was a strange, calm clarity. This wasn't my responsibility. It had never been my responsibility. These were consequences of their own choices, their own assumptions, their own disrespect. I typed a response, carefully choosing each word. I'm sorry you had to change your plans, but the children have 2 parents. It's time for both of you to act like it. I sent the message and turned the phone off again. Beth looked at me from behind her book. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. That evening, instead of a complicated Christmas Eve dinner, we kept things simple. Pasta with fresh vegetables from the market, salad, a glass of wine each. We ate on the deck while the sun set spectacularly over the water. The sky turned pink and orange and purple, colors so vivid they seemed almost unreal. Merry Christmas Eve, Beth said, raising her glass. Merry Christmas Eve, I replied. We touched glasses gently. The sound was clear and pure. There were no fireworks, no expensive gifts, no stress or obligations or hidden resentments. Just 2 friends sharing a peaceful meal by the ocean. And it was more meaningful than any elaborate celebration I had ever tried to create for people who never appreciated it. You know what's strange? I said after a while. What's that? I don't miss any of it. I thought I would feel terrible. I thought I would miss the children, the traditions, all that chaotic Christmas energy. But I don't. I just feel relief. That's because you're finally exactly where you should be, Beth said gently, with yourself. That night, I slept deeply again. I dreamed of the ocean, of walking along an endless beach with no destination, no timeline, just the freedom to move at my own pace. Christmas Day arrived quiet and beautiful. Beth and I had a leisurely breakfast and went for a long walk on a trail that followed the coastline. The views were stunning. Rocky cliffs, wild vegetation, the vast ocean stretching to the horizon. Everything felt bigger than my small problems, my complicated family, my years of hurt. In the afternoon, we decided to go to the town's only restaurant. It was a small, family-owned place with wooden tables and windows overlooking the water. There were other people there, also spending a peaceful Christmas. An elderly couple holding hands across their table. A group of friends laughing warmly. Everyone seemed relaxed and content. We ordered fresh fish and a bottle of white wine. The food was delicious, prepared with obvious care. This wasn't an elaborate 15-course feast. It was simple food, made well. And I can actually enjoy it because I wasn't worried about serving others, cleaning up after others, or managing everyone else's experience. While we were eating, my phone started vibrating insistently in my purse. I took it out and saw Rebecca calling over and over. I sighed and finally answered, "Yes? Mum." Her voice sounded different, controlled but strained. "We need to talk. I'm having dinner. I'm busy." "You're busy?" she repeated, and I heard disbelief in her tone. "It's Christmas Day and you're busy?" "That's correct. Daniel and I want to come to your house tomorrow. We need to sort this out face to face." "There's nothing to sort out, Rebecca. I've already made my decision clear. You can't just walk away and pretend you don't have responsibilities to this family." "My only responsibility is to myself. You're adults. You need to learn to manage your own lives." "What about the children? What did they do to deserve this?" "The children didn't do anything wrong. But it's not my job to raise them. I already raised my children. Now it's your turn to raise yours. I don't recognize you anymore. Good, I said calmly. Because the woman you knew doesn't exist anymore. She got tired of being invisible. She got tired of being used. She decided she deserved better. There was a long pause. Then Rebecca spoke in a lower voice, almost threatening. Fine. If this is what you want, then fine. But don't expect us to come looking for you when you get back. Don't expect to be included in anything. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences. I will live with them perfectly well. I said, and then I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear, from liberation, from the power of finally setting boundaries after a lifetime of having none. Beth reached across the table and squeezed my hand. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. That night, back at the house, I sat on the deck with the journal I had bought. I opened to the first blank page and began to write. Today is Christmas, and I am exactly where I want to be. For the first time in my entire life, I chose my own peace over everyone else's expectations. And I don't regret it. Not even a little bit. I kept writing. About the years of silence and invisibility. About the moments of being taken for granted. About learning that saying no isn't selfishness, but self-preservation. About discovering that love without respect isn't really love at all. I wrote until my hand ached, and when I finally closed the journal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope for my future. The days that followed passed in a gentle rhythm I had never known before. Beth and I woke when we wanted, had leisurely breakfasts on the deck, took long walks on the beach, read books, talked about everything and nothing. There were no schedules, no demands, no pressure, just time moving slow and soft like the waves. On the afternoon of December 28th, I was reading in the living room when my phone rang. I had left it on but silenced. This time it wasn't a call. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it out of curiosity. Miriam, this is Sandra Foster, your neighbor from down the street. Rebecca and Daniel have been at your house for the past 2 hours. They've been knocking and ringing the doorbell repeatedly. I thought you should know. They seem quite agitated. I read the message twice, imagining the scene. Rebecca and Daniel standing on my doorstep, confused and angry, expecting me to materialize and apologize, expecting things to go back to normal. I replied to Sandra, "Thank you for letting me know. I'm out of town and won't be back until after New Year's. If they come back, please don't give them any information about where I am." Sandra responded quickly. "Understood. Take care of yourself." I put the phone aside and returned to my book. But I couldn't concentrate. I knew this confrontation wasn't over. I knew that eventually I would have to face them in person. But I also knew something crucial now. My peace didn't depend on their understanding or approval. It depended on me standing firm in my own worth. That evening, while we were having dinner, I told Beth what had happened. "What are you going to do when you go back?" she asked. "I don't know exactly, but I know I'm not going back to being who I was before. That version of me is gone. And if they don't accept that?" "If they refuse to change, then they don't accept it. I can't control their reactions. I can only control mine. I can only control how I allow myself to be treated." Beth nodded approvingly. "You're going to be okay, Miriam. You're stronger than you realize." On December 29th, we decided to explore a neighboring town. Beth had heard about a small art gallery there. We drove for about 30 minutes through beautiful coastal scenery and found the gallery in a converted old warehouse. It was small, but filled with incredible work. Paintings of local landscapes, wood sculptures, black and white photographs, all created by regional artists. There was one painting that caught my eye immediately. It showed an older woman sitting in a wooden chair on a beach, looking out at the ocean. Her posture was peaceful, contemplative.
There was something about that image that resonated deeply with me. It felt like looking at my own transformation captured in oil paint. "That's beautiful," I said to the gallery owner. "A local artist painted it," she explained. "She says it represents the peace that comes after surviving the storm." "How much is it?" $285. It was more than I had planned to spend, but something about that painting spoke to me. It was like seeing my own journey reflected back at me. "I'll take it." On the drive back to the beach house, we carefully secured the painting in the car. When we got back, we hung it in the living room where I could see it from my bedroom door. Beth stepped back to admire it. "It's perfect for you." "Yes," I agreed. "I think it is." That night, I wrote more in my journal. About the fear I had felt at the beginning of this journey. About the guilt I had expected but never really experienced. About discovering that chosen solitude was completely different from imposed loneliness. About learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, even when people call you selfish for having them. On December 30th, while we were walking on the beach in the late afternoon, my phone rang. This time, it was a number I recognized. James, Rebecca's husband. I hesitated, then decided it was time to face this directly. I answered, "Yes?" "Miriam, I need to talk to you." His voice was serious, formal, like he was conducting business. "I'm listening." "Rebecca is devastated. You have no idea the damage you've caused with this stunt. Actually, I understand perfectly the damage I allowed them to cause me for years. I'm just no longer accepting it. This isn't about you. This is about family." "Family?" I said. "James, how many times have you invited me to something that didn't involve babysitting your children? How many times have you asked me how I'm doing, really asked, and waited for an honest answer? How many times have you treated me as something more than a convenient babysitter?" Silence on the other end. "Exactly. Never. Because for you, for Rebecca, for Daniel, I only matter when I'm useful." "Well, I don't accept that anymore. You're their grandmother. You're supposed to be there for them. I am a complete person before I am a grandmother. And that person deserves respect, consideration, and reciprocity. Rebecca says she doesn't want to see you again. That's her choice. I'll be here when she's ready to treat me with basic human dignity. But I'm not going to beg for respect that should be freely given. You're being incredibly selfish. And you're being incredibly blind. But it's no longer my job to make you see what you don't want to see." I hung up. This time, my hands weren't shaking at all. This time I felt only a deep, settled calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you've finally done the right thing for yourself, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Beth had heard the conversation. She didn't say anything. She just walked over and put her arm around my shoulders. We stood there together, watching the sun set over the water in spectacular shades of orange and gold. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, we decided to have a small celebration. We bought fresh seafood at the market and cooked it ourselves, laughing and talking while we prepared the meal. It wasn't elaborate or complicated. It was just two friends making dinner together, enjoying the process as much as the result. We set the small dining table with candles and wildflowers we had collected on our walks. At 11 o'clock, we went up to the deck with glasses of sparkling cider. From there, we could see fireworks in the distance over the town, small bursts of color against the dark sky. "To new beginnings," Beth said, raising her glass. "To choosing myself," I replied. We touched glasses as the clock struck midnight. The church bells in town began to chime, welcoming the new year. A year that I would enter as a different woman. Not broken, but rebuilt. Not defeated, but strengthened. Not invisible, but finally visible to the person who mattered most. Myself. January 1st dawned peaceful and clear. Beth and I spent most of the day doing very little. Reading, napping, sitting on the deck, watching the ocean. In the afternoon, I received a text message. This time, it was from Daniel.
Mom, this has gone on long enough. You need to come back and fix this. Rebecca hasn't stopped crying. The kids keep asking for you. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. I read the message several times. The attempt to use my deceased husband as emotional leverage didn't work anymore. He had been a good man who had valued and respected me. If he were alive, he would understand exactly why I was doing this. I replied carefully. Daniel, your father taught me that real love isn't manipulation. He taught me that relationships are built on mutual respect. If Rebecca is crying, perhaps it's time for both of you to reflect on why that is. If the kids are asking for me, tell them their grandmother loves them very much, but she also loves herself. I'll be back in 2 days. When I return, things are going to be different. Either you accept the new me, or we have nothing more to discuss. I sent the message and turned off the phone. I was done explaining myself, done justifying my basic need for respect, done teaching grown adults how to treat their mother with dignity. On January 2nd, Beth and I packed our things. The drive home was peaceful. I looked out the window, processing everything I had experienced over the past weeks. I wasn't a different person. I was the same person I had always been, but finally free of the chains I had allowed others to put on me. Free of the guilt and obligation and endless self-sacrifice that had defined my existence for far too long. When we pulled up to my house, Beth helped me get my suitcase from the trunk.
Are you going to be okay?
She asked. I'm going to be perfect. We hugged tightly. Thank you for everything, Beth. For seeing me, for being there, for helping me find myself again. Anytime you need another escape, you just call me. We'll do it again. I watched her drive away, then turned to look at my house. It was exactly as I had left it. Clean, quiet, empty. But that emptiness didn't frighten me anymore. It was space. Space to build something new. Space to create a life that actually belonged to me. I hung the painting I had bought in my living room, right above the sofa. The woman looking out at the ocean was now looking at me every day, reminding me of who I had become, reminding me to never go back to being invisible. That evening, as I was making tea in my kitchen, the doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw them, Rebecca and Daniel, standing on my doorstep together, both looking serious and uncertain. I took a deep breath. This was it, the final conversation. The moment where everything would either change or end. I opened the door, but I didn't invite them inside. We need to talk, Rebecca said quietly. Then talk. They stood there on my doorstep, looking at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was a stranger to them. Maybe they had never really known me at all. They had only known the version of me that served their needs. Can we come in? Daniel asked. That depends on what you've come to say. Rebecca's face was tense, dark circles under her eyes, showing sleepless nights. But I didn't feel the instinctive urge to fix that anymore. It wasn't my responsibility to manage her emotional state. We came to talk about what happened, she said. About how you abandoned us at Christmas. I didn't abandon anyone. I refused to be used. There's a significant difference. You left us with no warning, no backup plan, Daniel started to say. You created a plan that used me without my knowledge or consent. You made assumptions about my availability without ever asking me. That's on you, not me. Rebecca crossed her arms defensively. You could have just talked to us about it instead of disappearing. I've been trying to talk to you for years, but you've never listened. You've never cared about my experience or my feelings. So I stopped talking and started acting. This is ridiculous, Daniel said, his voice rising. You're our mother. You're supposed to be there for us. That's what mothers do. I was your mother for your entire childhood, I said firmly. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. I gave you everything I had. But you're not children anymore. You're adults with your own families. and I am no longer obligated to sacrifice my own well-being for your convenience.
So that's it?
Rebecca's voice cracked.
We're not your family anymore? We don't matter?
You stopped treating me like family years ago. You turned me into a service, into something useful but not valuable. And I finally realized I deserve better than that.
That's not true,
Rebecca protested, but her voice lacked conviction. No? I challenged her. When was my last birthday, Rebecca?
She opened her mouth, but no words came out.
August 16th. More than 4 months ago. You didn't call. You didn't visit. You sent a text message 3 days later. And you, Daniel, you never acknowledged it at all. Daniel looked away, unable to meet my eyes. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community, so we can bring more truthful stories for you. So what now? Rebecca asked quietly, tears starting to fall. You're just cutting us out of your life forever? I'm not cutting you out. I'm setting boundaries. Real, healthy boundaries. I'm no longer going to be available every time you need free childcare. I'm no longer going to pay for things you should be paying for yourselves. I'm no longer going to sacrifice my own needs and well-being to solve your problems. I have my own life, and it's time I actually lived it. But you're the grandmother, Rebecca said desperately. Yes, I am. And I love my grandchildren very much. But loving them doesn't mean sacrificing my dignity. If you want me to be part of your lives, it's going to be on my terms, with respect, with consideration, with actual reciprocity, not just one-sided taking. This feels like punishment, Daniel said. Call it whatever you want. I call it self-respect. I call it finally valuing myself as much as I've always valued both of you. There was a long silence. Rebecca and Daniel looked at each other, having some silent conversation that only siblings can have. Finally, Rebecca spoke, her voice small. What if we can't accept that? What if we can't meet your conditions? Then we have nothing more to talk about, I said calmly. My door is open when you're ready to see me as a complete person, not just a resource. When you're ready to treat me with the respect that every human being deserves. But I'm not going to beg for it anymore. Not from you, not from anyone. Rebecca turned and started walking back to her car, crying openly now. Daniel stayed for a moment longer, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it anger, confusion, or maybe, just maybe, the first glimmer of understanding? I never thought you'd actually do something like this, he said finally. Me neither, I admitted. But it turns out I'm much stronger than any of you realized. He nodded slowly, then followed his sister to the car. I watched them drive away without any dramatic goodbye, without any promises or resolutions. Just two adults leaving to figure out their own problems for once. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. But it wasn't pounding from fear or regret. It was pounding from the exhilaration of finally standing up for myself, of finally claiming the respect I should have demanded decades ago. The days that followed were quiet. My phone didn't ring. There were no text messages, no attempts at contact. It was as if my children had decided to follow through on their threat to disappear from my life. And surprisingly, I didn't feel empty or devastated. I felt peaceful, calm, like I was finally living in my own life instead of constantly managing everyone else's. I started building new routines. I woke up when my body naturally wanted to wake up. I ate meals slowly, savoring every bite. I finally read all the books I had accumulated over the years. I signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center and discovered I had a talent I never knew existed, because I had never had time to explore it. I met other women at the painting class, women my age with their own stories of finding themselves late in life. One of them, Patricia Coleman, told me her own story of setting boundaries with adult children who had been using her for years. Not all of them come back, she warned me gently. Some never understand, but even if they don't, you'll be okay, because you finally have yourself. She was right. A month passed, then 6 weeks.
February arrived with its brief cold days and early sunsets. I continued living my quiet, autonomous life, painting, reading, taking long walks, having coffee with my new friends. Actually living instead of just existing as someone's solution to their problems. One Tuesday afternoon, in mid-February, I was in my garden planting early spring bulbs when I heard my gate open. I looked up and saw Daniel standing there alone, hands in his pockets. Looking uncertain. "Hi, Mum." I took off my gardening gloves and stood up slowly. "Daniel, can I come in? Can we talk?" I thought about it for a moment, weighing my options. Then I nodded. "You can come in." We went into the house. I poured him a glass of water. We sat in the living room, the painting of the woman looking at the ocean watching us from the wall. "Nice painting," he said awkwardly. "I bought it on my trip." There was an uncomfortable silence. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice unsteady. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we treated you, about how we used you instead of valuing you. And you're right, Mom." "You're right about all of it." I didn't say anything. I just waited, giving him space to continue. "Karen and I have been talking about how we depended on you for everything, about how we never asked how you were doing, never checked on you unless we needed something, about how we turned you into a convenience instead of treating you like our mother." He wiped his eyes roughly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm truly, genuinely sorry." The words I had waited years to hear had finally arrived, but I no longer needed them the same way. They no longer defined my worth or my peace. "Thank you for saying that," I replied quietly. "Do you think we can start over, differently, with respect, the way it should have been all along?" "That depends on you. I've made my boundaries very clear. If you're genuinely willing to respect them, then yes, we can try to rebuild something." "We will respect them," he said quickly. "I promise you that." We talked for another hour. It was a small, careful conversation, like two people learning to know each other again after a long absence. When he left, nothing was completely resolved, but it was a beginning, a tiny seed of possibility. I don't know if Rebecca will eventually come to, or if our relationship is permanently damaged. I don't know if things will ever be completely normal again, whatever normal means. But I've learned something crucial through all of this. My peace doesn't depend on them changing. It depends on me standing firm in my own value, regardless of whether they ever recognize it. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea and my journal. I looked up at the early stars appearing in the darkening sky and thought about the entire journey. From that painful moment of overhearing the conversation to this moment of hard-won peace. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I learned that letting go is not abandoning. It's freeing yourself. I learned that true love doesn't demand endless sacrifice, but requires mutual respect. I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself, to claim your own life, to demand the dignity that is your birthright. I am 68 years old, and I am finally whole. Not because someone else made me whole, but because I finally found the courage to choose myself." I closed the journal and looked up at the stars. I don't know what comes next in this story. Maybe my children will learn and grow. Maybe they won't. Maybe my grandchildren will understand someday that their grandmother was brave. Or maybe they'll never understand at all. But none of that matters as much as it once did. Because for the first time in decades, I am complete. Not because someone else validated me, but because I finally validated myself. And that, I've discovered, is more than enough. That is everything.